and welcome to the show where we share the stories of the many who intersect with our healthcare system but are rarely heard from. My name is Kevin Poe, founder and editor of Kevin MD. Today on the show, we have Manpreets Samra. She is a nephrologist, and she wrote the Kevin MD article, To MBA or Not to MBA as an MD, A Physician's Journey. Manpreet, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kevin, for having me.
We'll get into your article in a little bit, but first off, can you share your story and your journey to where you are today?
Absolutely. So currently I'm based in Chicago, Illinois. I'm a practicing transplant nephrologist. I'd say my journey towards medical school probably started at the age of 5 when my immigrant Asian Indian parents, told me that was the best line of career to go into, engineering, medicine, or law. But I was actually 13 years old when I moved to India from California, and I went to a boarding school there. My paternal grandfather wanted my siblings and I to learn the Indian culture, and so I actually went to high school there, and I went to medical school there as well, which started at the age of 17. And so I came back to the U.S. I did my training. I did my residency in internal medicine in a chief year. And then I did my nephrology training in California. And then I practiced as a general nephrologist for about 3 years and realized that I had always wanted to do transplant. So actually came to the University of Chicago, did a transplant training. In between, also did a functional medicine training to try and marry functional medicine and nephrology, and then practiced as a transplant nephrologist right out of fellowship. And then I realized that I wasn't in the most ideal work environment and that I needed an exit plan. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of how I'd been thinking about doing an MBA for a very long time. My father is in business. He's a self-proclaimed successful entrepreneur. And I knew business kind of always ran in my blood, number one. And number two, I just feel like through, all of us for the 12+ years of training we go through, we barely get any really business of medicine discussion, lecture, minus the insurance agents that maybe come and do a grand rounds or so. And so while I was at this university, they actually offered an MBA as one of the perks for faculty. Mm-hmm. And I found it a no-brainer. I thought, let me jump into this now. I've always wanted to do an MBA. I've always wanted to learn more about the finance and business side of things. And so I started it. I started a part-time MBA course. I would take my classes in the evening, or I would take online classes. And there, I was basically learning kind of economics, finance, accounting, and a lot of leadership and management, which is actually something I did not expect to come from the MBA. And there were some very specific health care courses and healthcare strategy courses. So it was a lot. It was a very large time commitment, but it was not difficult, and it was a breeze compared to medical school.
So you said that you wanted to be a doctor since you were 5, and now that you have all that training, you're a nephrologist. Is medicine what you thought it would be?
Not at all. Not at all. It's like the nobility of it is what was sold to me, the idea of it, the stability of career that it provides. But over the last 1 year, COVID has proven to us that perhaps medicine is not as stable of a career as we thought after all, with so many friends and colleagues like being laid off and, even not having job security myself, not knowing what would happen. So it's absolutely not what I thought it would be. That being said, I enjoy the practice of medicine. I love seeing my patients. I could never see myself not practice medicine, but it's definitely not what I thought it would be.
And you had mentioned the thought of an exit plan. So tell me a little bit more about what you mean by that.
Yes, absolutely. So at my previous job, it was not an ideal job. It was not what I wanted. And I I knew that like about 3 to 6 months into the job, and I didn't want to be stuck. I had talked to many friends who had been stuck in it in the past, in their jobs, and I didn't want that to happen. And so I had started thinking about, well, what can I do to make myself more sellable, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
in such a tight market like Chicago. And that was another reason for me to start the MBA. I figured, the MBA would open up so many opportunities for me, and I could then start looking for another job, another career, because I still did want to stay in the Chicago area. And so that was kind of the exit plan.
All right. So let's talk about that article that you wrote, To MBA or Not to MBA as an MD, A Physician's Journey. Now, for those who didn't read that article, can you just walk my audience through it and share the story of why you decided to write it?
Yes, absolutely. So I feel like as physicians, we're all really lifelong learners. Like
Mm-hmm.
we love learning, and personally, I consider myself a self-proclaimed nerd. You can teach me about anything. I love it. And the second thing is, I wish someone had written this for me before I embarked upon the MBA, because there were a lot of surprises that came along the way. And one was, I underestimated how much time it would take, what a time commitment it would be, even though I was doing a part-time MBA and I completed it in 22 months. And also the time away from my family. At the time, my toddler was 2.5 years old. My husband was very supportive. I mean, without his support, I couldn't have done it, especially with the evening classes that ran from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., sometimes being on call through those classes. So the reason I wrote it was so if there's anyone else in my position who's considering doing an MBA, there's some practical life considerations to take into account before going into it.
Being a physician and getting an MBA, in terms of the job market, what kind of doors does that open?
So for one thing, it opened a lot of actually pharma doors for me, maybe 3 pharmaceutical companies. It also opened up the door for some diagnostic company, kind of medical directorship positions. It opens up non-clinical work as well, again, at the directorship level for insurance companies like Blue Cross Blue Shield, United Healthcare, etc. Now, the route that I took, I did interview with many places, but the route that I took was choosing to become a medical director of a brand new kidney transplant program, because I did still love the clinical part, but I also did want more of the administrative and directorship role.
Now, for those physicians who do want to pursue leadership positions, is an MBA truly required? And if so, tell me exactly what kind of skills they teach you that we don't necessarily get in medical school.
Absolutely not. You do not need an MBA to go into a leadership role, is probably what I realized. The classes were very, certain classes, certain professors were very provocative. You use a different part of your brain that you don't use in practicing medicine every day. And we did have leadership classes, a lot of self-assessment, a lot of self-awareness. We read, a lot of books that may come under the self-improvement category. But it's not that you can't learn that on your own, reading the books, or even going through any of the leadership academies that are out there specifically for physicians or non-physicians, for anyone in the healthcare field. So I don't think you need an MBA to go into a leadership role. I think it helps because it gives you tools and it gives you language. I think really that's what it gives you in a very, in a defined setting, but you can learn those on your own as well.
So if I'm a practicing physician and I'm interested in gaining an MBA, I do a Google search. Thousands of MBA courses are available. Some are virtual, and before the pandemic, some are in person. What are some of the things that I should look for if I'm considering an MBA program as a physician?
So taking one step back, to know why you want to do the MBA, I think would be the first question, right? So if you want to do it because you know you want to go into a leadership role in a hospital, then I would suggest looking at specifically a healthcare focused MBA. And there are many of those out there. I will tell you that the MBA that I did was not, or an executive MBA. I will tell you the MBA that I did was neither an executive MBA, nor was it a healthcare focused MBA. It did have electives where I could do healthcare courses. And I elected to do this because it cost me less than $5,000, to be honest with you, to do it. I did look at other MBA programs such as Booth in Chicago and Kellogg, but the price tag of over 6 digits, for me, just wasn't worth it.
We're talking to Manpreet Samra. She is a nephrologist, and she wrote the Kevin MD article, To MBA or Not to MBA as an MD, A Physician's Journey. Manpreet, now that you got your MBA, is there anything that you know now that you wish you knew back before you started this journey?
Yes. So I think the time commitment, I think being prepared to have the time away from family and if I could kind of change how I had done it, I wish I had done it at a slower pace. And not tried so hard to get through it. I feel like as physicians, our mentality is just go, 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 do it, check, check, check. That is what I wish I had told myself, so that instead of 22 months, if it took me 36 months, so be it.
And if a physician is interested in looking into the benefits and pros and cons of an MBA, what kind of resources, maybe online, do you recommend them take a look at?
So there is a book, and I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the author. It is MBA in a nutshell. So that was what I started off with. I kind of skimmed through this book, but I would start there. And then, I actually Googled a lot of this, and I did a lot of information out there, which is what led me to write the article. When you do put in, MBA, MD, or you put MBA healthcare focused, there are, 10 to 20 MBA programs that will come up. I did start an MD MBA Facebook group, so they're more than welcome to join that as well, and can have their questions answered. And of course, you could reach out to me as well at manpreetsamra@gmail.com for any questions.
And when you told your colleagues that you were pursuing an MBA, what was their reaction?
They thought I was crazy. They knew I had a very busy clinical practice. They knew I had a toddler and a family, and they were like, there are only 24 hours in a day, so when exactly will you do this? But those who knew me, knew that I was very interested in business from a very long time, and so they were not surprised. But most of them were just questioning the where the time commitment would come from. And what's interesting now is what I'm enjoying the most and how I'm utilizing the MBA in addition to my directorship role is teaching medical students, residents, and fellows about personal finance, about healthcare strategy, about the business of medicine, as well as attendings.
And when you teach these medical students and residents about finance and the business of medicine, what's their general literacy level before they meet you?
It's extremely low. The questions that come up are very basic, and these are the same questions I had when I started out. They're very, very basic questions about 401ks and IRAs and Roth and kind of those very, very, very basic questions. Even something as, like the way our taxes are done, the difference between marginal tax rate. I mean, all these very basic questions. And at the end of it, I think it ends up being extremely useful.
And my final question, what's your take-home message you want to leave with the Kevin MD audience?
If your love is to continue lifelong learning, and that is one of your reasons for doing an MBA, by all means, have at it. I would say to do it in a very financially responsible way. And secondly, if you do decide to do an MBA, be sure to map out your time commitment and be aware of what that will be, so that you don't burn yourself out.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your time and insight. And thanks again for being on the show.
Thank you for having me, Kevin. Take care.